My name's Abigail, and you're listening to Absolutely Me. Okay, welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of my episode with Melanie. We ended up splitting our episodes. We recorded the part 1 a couple of weeks ago, and then we're back today to record part 2. So if you hear any differences in sound or anything from the last recording, it's because it's a completely different day. It's been a few weeks. But I'm super excited to be here with Melanie. We also wanted to break it up because Melanie was having a lot of thoughts about the questions. She had a lot of really amazing things to say, but there's a lot of things that we felt like we needed to retouch on and to talk about in more depth, and that it was kind of hard for you to talk about, right, Mel?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah.
Thanks for breaking it up. Yeah, I found myself, I think it was a part of, like, we started kind of, like, after work or something one day on a weekday, and, like, the night was getting later. And it's, for me, it can be kind of, it's a heavy topic to dive back into, and it's so layered and nuanced, and, like, there's the ways that I was feeling back then, and there's the ways that I feel now about it. And so it can just be hard to talk about for a long time on end, and I just found myself, I felt like I was glitching.
Yeah.
As I started to talk about things, and so the night was just getting late, so, yeah, I appreciate you wanting to circle back with this, and so that we can have a better conversation about this last part, which is important.
It is. It's so important. I appreciate you being willing to even come on the podcast. So I'm excited that we're here. We get to talk some more. Yeah. Where we left off with our last episode was just leading up to where Melanie had been talking about deciding that leaving the LDS church is what she wanted to do, and that is what most aligned with her beliefs and what she felt like she needed to do for herself. And so for this episode, we just kind of wanted to talk about the relationship that she had with her family as a result of leaving the church and how that has evolved over time, and then also just her journey with spirituality post leaving the church and kind of what that looks like up to this point. And then also Melanie has some really awesome advice about helping people who are maybe going through a faith transition currently, or if you have people in your life that you want to support who are going through a faith transition. So we'll just jump right back in, and I'm super excited. But Melanie, do you want to talk about how your relationship with your family changed as a result of leaving the church?
Well, hi. Thank you for having me back and being patient with me, because this aspect of this journey is, I'm coming to find, is a lot harder to talk about than I initially thought it would be, and like we've kind of done a few different takes at this point, because I think it's sometimes not until I'm having to kind of talk about this part of it, which I think is the part that affected me most, and has stayed with me most. It's not until I'm kind of having to like talk about this stuff that I'm realizing how deep my wounding still is around it. And so yeah, I think that my particular circumstance in leaving the church caused a pretty big misunderstanding and rift within me and my family. like I said before, they just couldn't relate to like what was happening with me. I don't think any of us really had a lot of experience or knowledge around what something like this looks like, and so when I'm being generous, I think that I can say that we were all just confused, and but ultimately, whether it was conscious or not on their end, the way that I was treated and the things that kind of the othering and the way that I felt around the family for probably over a decade was just very lonely and isolating. There were things that were overtly said and done that felt painful. I was told that I couldn't, that I wasn't allowed to talk about my beliefs, or the lack thereof, at one point. And so there were a lot of messaging that I was getting that I wasn't allowed to show up authentically with my own family, and that was incredibly painful to kind of navigate as a 20-something, and into my 30s. There was, like I said, there were some overt things, but I think something that stayed with me as well was not what happened, but what didn't happen, which was like kind of a lack of curiosity around who I was, what my life was like. It felt just that I was kept at arm's length, and the things that got interpreted to me through that was that I was dangerous, that I was not to be trusted, that I was somehow would cause harm by being myself. And so I felt closeted for many years in being able to like show up as myself, and we all want to feel like we belong somewhere, and it took many years and me having to like find somewhat of a family outside of my family for me to start to carve out how my place in the world and how I belong, and like find my worthiness through that. And then I was able to kind of circle back around to the family years later, once I had gained a better sense of self. So yeah, that's kind of the long-winded
No, it's good. We like the long-winded
version of that. And like I say, it's complicated for me to talk about because it's so nuanced, and it was, I mean, I'm in my 40s at this point, and this has been going on since my early 20s, and there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of there's the way I felt in the past, and there's the way I feel now, and there's in hindsight, and it's just can be really complicated to parcel through the events and that. But in general, I would just kind of say, unfortunately, it felt as though me choosing to do something that felt very much in integrity with what I felt was the right thing for me to do took me away from my family and feeling as though I could be a part of my family in the way that I would have liked to. That the things that I had to offer were no longer of value for many, many years, and that has affected me and stayed with me. I carry that kind of feeling of unworthiness with me still, and in on those really dark days, that's the stuff that creeps up for me, that that is kind of hard to deal with. So
Just feeling a lot of rejection from your family and because of your decisions, and feeling like because you were not following the same path as your family, you felt a lot of unworthiness, and maybe because of some overt things that happened, and maybe just like you said, because of just the way, like the attitude towards you from some family members. And I'm sure that is, I mean, that's like a lot to have to carry and to feel about yourself. And so I don't even think it's a surprise that you're feeling those feelings still. Because like you said, it was for a long time and it was really hard. And like that kind of, that like rejection, and that's kind of a harsh word to use for it, but I'm sure that's kind of what it felt like. Just like that harsh rejection for such a long time. Like that's like a deep wound to have to heal, and we can circle back around to this too, but I think maybe there has hopefully been some repair in that way, since it's been 20 years since you left the church.
Let's see, I left, it was closer to when I was my 30s, so it's really only been like 13 years that I kind of officially left. But yeah, like I think that's kind of adequate to how I was feeling back then. Was very rejected by the very people who were supposed to have my back in theory, and I think it creates like a deep wounding of around this idea of like doing something that's in integrity for you and in your best interest is not okay, and that there was no sense of like people seeing me and being like, hey, I'm really curious about this process, and I really respect, like, if this is what you feel like you need to do, I really respect you being able to have the courage to do that. There was no conversations like that around it. And again, I think they were acting out of fear because they loved me and they didn't know a better way to act back then.
Yeah.
And yeah, there has been steps towards healing that stuff, absolutely. And I've been very lucky to have a lot of people in my family come around to that understanding and take accountability for some of the ways that they acted and some of the things that they said back then. And because I have friends who are in families that I don't know that they'll ever get that kind of resolution from them. And so I've been lucky to have that. I think I've just been surprised as we've been talking about this. How particular aspect has really stayed with me, and how emotional I still get around that. So I think it's a testament to like this stuff. This stuff can be so tricky, and our best intentions can sometimes be really not really work out the way that we hoped that they would.
Yeah. And I know you had mentioned that you kind of swung to the opposite side of the pendulum from believing to just like going and believing in nothing. Mm-hmm. After. Do you feel like your family's reaction had some impact on your like views about religion?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because from more of like a heady place, and like I was throwing it all kind of out because I was needing to start over, and but I'm not sure I've thought too much about like if my family had as much of a role to play in how like quote unquote extreme I went. It's possible I was just needing to distance myself as far away from who I used to be as possible in order to kind of figure myself out, rebuild, if you will. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to give that some thought.
Yeah, I was just curious. And from leaving the church, what has your spiritual journey been like since then?
Yeah, so something that really I heard something the other day. I followed this woman who is from South Africa, and she was raised in a fundamentalist Christian organization, and she's now a Gnostic, and she was talking about her faith transition and coming out of her fundamentalist Christian church, where, and was talking about how when she left, she didn't realize she could bring spirit or the Holy Spirit with her. And so coming back into spirituality for me, I kind of feel the same way. Like I left not knowing that I could, not knowing how to, because I would have these very profound experiences in church. Like I did. Like I did feel like there were some these moments in which I communed with God and with Spirit, and those were very real for me, and I felt very led, and coming out of the religion, I didn't know how to bring that with me, because when you have those experiences in church, it's very like they kind of, you have these teachers and bishops and leaders telling you that when you have those experiences, it's because it kind of comes from the church. It comes from being part of this organization that is the church, and you're being blessed with these experiences, which is not unique to Mormonism. That's kind of how it is with all organized religions, is they claim to hold this connection with God that nobody else has. And what I now believe in is that my relationship with spirit, whatever you want to call that, like people call it the universe, great mystery, just the unknown, the higher power, that I lost my train of thought. One sec. That's not owned by any religion. That comes from a very personal place inside you and inside all of us. And it wasn't until I was able to find community with people who were outside of religious organizations but had a connection to what spirituality was like for them, that I started kind of reintegrating what that could look like for me. I think that as I've looked back on things, the years between me leaving and being atheist and me kind of coming back into relationship with spirituality were years where I was doing some deep healing around what I felt was somewhat of a betrayal, or that I had been misled to believe things that just weren't true. And I, as I got into community with these people that had those connections, I was able to start to open myself back up to what that could look like for me. And it kind of reminded me of when I first went off to college and I was exposed to these different lifestyles. And so I once again started to kind of investigate all of the different ways that I could tap into a sense of spirituality, and was like kind of playing that game of like, okay, who am I now? Like, am I this? Am I that? Like, who do I want to surround myself by? What resonates with me and what doesn't? And so for the past, I guess maybe 10 years, it has been a journey of kind of defining what my spiritual practice looks like for me. And I just like to take from a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. I do not hold one solid belief in that this is the way that it is. I actually am pretty mistrusting of anyone or anything that claims to hold the one truth. I just don't think that exists. I think that there are universal truths that exist in the world, but that no one owns that. So.
What are some things that you were exposed to that you feel like resonated with you?
I think early on, I really liked astrology. I had friends that did tarot and oracle cards, and that was really interesting to me. And what I think a lot of those things led me to, though, were just coming into a place of figuring out what your intuition feels like being guided by your intuition. And all of those things are kind of tools that can, like, just bring up possibilities, ask the right questions, things to ponder, and then ultimately kind of helping you just commune with what feels best for you, because we are all on a different path, and I don't think any of our paths should look the same. And so the best gift I think that we can give ourselves is kind of familiarizing ourselves with what our gut and what and Mormonism calls it the Holy Ghost.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling inside you of like what you should do. Familiarizing yourself with that. That's been one of my biggest tools and takeaways from early on, and kind of not perfecting, but just getting better and practicing that. Something that deeply resonates with me now is just being present with the seasons and with the moon and its different shapes, and being able to keep time with some of those things helps me stay really present.
Mm-hmm.
Helps me take time out of my day to celebrate something, and to have a lot of gratitude for where I am, to give thanks for all the things that I have. I think gratitude is a huge part of my spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
and coming home to that feeling a lot keeps me very grounded and present. So,
What do you think you express, like, your spirituality now? What are some ways that you feel like you express your spirituality now?
I think probably trying to be as authentic as possible. I think that is the best way to commune with spirit, or to commune with other people,
Mm-hmm.
is just through authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's I have the privilege of working with a teacher. She's a indigenous woman, and I've been learning about Lakota traditions, and there's a saying in Lakota and other indigenous traditions. It's a phrase that you say after you're done speaking, which is all my relations. So, and something I love about that is what it means is it's not just all my my familial relations that you're acknowledging. It's your relationship to everything, and it's a reminder and in honor of acting in integrity with everything that you come in contact with. So whether that's a table or a flower in the garden, you act in integrity with those things. So you don't carve on tables, you don't smash the flower, like you honor and you act in integrity with everything you come in contact with people. And I just love that reminder, and that also helps me. And I feel like, so authenticity and integrity just with myself, it gives me those are some of the things that I really try to come home to within my spirituality, and just the way that I want to show up in the world and show up with my relationships. And that can kind of look a little differently for everybody, but when I think of universal truths, I think that a lot of those same tenets, when you really look at a lot of religions, that they're very simple ideas that are at the base of everything. The idea of surrender, the idea of gratitude, of love, and what love truly means, and integrity and authenticity. I feel like those are the basis of what this experience maybe is supposed to be all about. And unfortunately, a lot of those things get co-opted by people and by people trying to take those things and manipulate them for selfish reasons.
I love that. I think there's a lot of people who are going to be able to resonate with a lot of the things that you say. And I love what you say about there being universal truths. And that's something I've always really felt, that there are things within every religion that kind of resonate with the same kind of fundamental truths that there are. And that it's really beautiful to me that with all these different religions and all the different stories of how they were formed and all the different places that they were formed, that people kind of are informed with these universal truths within themselves and just find different ways of expressing them. And I think that is really a way that people can connect more when talking about maybe religion or spirituality, instead of just like these hard truths, or like that you can only learn in one specific way, which I think is a lot of what people in the church struggle with, talking to people maybe outside of the church, is just realizing like there's more than one way to connect with these truths, and there's more than one way to learn these and like emulate them within yourself, like you said, with like authenticity, or connecting like with yourself, with your gut, and with a higher power, and like learning to connect with nature, and learning to connect with just like the way that the world functions, and letting those experiences like pass through you, and connecting with other people, and just like treating people with respect and dignity. And I think those are all things that pretty much everybody would agree on, and that are part of a lot of religious teachings anyways. And I just think like the more I have conversations with people, the more I realize like so many people have so many of these things in common that we all believe in, but that people can be blinded by, like you said, having this universal one truth and that it's hard for people to open their eyes. And I'm kind of rambling right now, but it just seems to me it's kind of hard for people to like look beyond that little narrow view and be like, oh, there's like a lot of paths to come to this conclusion about this certain aspect of spirituality.
Absolutely. And however you want to define spirit, like, I believe that when called, like, spirit will show up. Like, she's just stoked to be there, and she's going to whenever anyone calls on her, it doesn't matter what you believe, that she's going to show up. So that's why you can be in this religion and call on her and have these experiences, and they're authentic. They are real if they're real for you. And then you can be outside of a religion and have that. You can be part of any thing, and I believe that you have access to whether you like, whether it's this feeling that comes from our evolution and needing to make sense of the world, or whether it really is part of that energy that is the mechanics behind what runs everything in nature. It doesn't matter. And just the idea of believing in a higher power is so supportive and helpful. And in AA, for example, like, it is one of the most successful recovery programs in the United States, and I'm sure other places, but and it's because it invokes this idea of a higher power, but it doesn't. That can look different for everybody. They don't assign that to one thing. It's just they give people the tools to be able to access a higher power, whatever that looks like for them. And that, for whatever reason, that is something that gets us through some of the hardest times, and gives us hope and gives us something to reach for and to feel held in.
Yeah.
And, like, to your point, you said it very well. I was talking with a friend just recently, and he was saying something along the lines of he's trying to surround himself with people who have similar values, not necessarily opinions. Because opinions can change.
Yeah, I love that.
And depending on who you are, your background, where you are, like, your experiences, you're going to have differing opinions, and that's okay. But those core values are ultimately, I think, what's most important. And if we were really to talk to people in open-hearted ways and in ways where we aren't trying to be right or to convince anyone of anything, we might find that we have so much more in common, and we share those values so much more than we think.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think are ways that, just kind of wrap up all the things I feel like we've been talking about, what are ways you feel like you wish people could have supported you going through a faith transition, or things that people did do that helped you as you were going through the faith transition?
I think that one of the ways that could have helped / did help with some people, like with my relationship I had, that kind of that guy I dated early on in my transition, just providing somebody to talk to that again, where there's not judgment or like them needing you to think a certain way. Just, I think the best way that we can support anyone through really anything is just being there, asking open-ended questions, allowing I think it's a great service to just be able to listen to people. Sometimes like this might not answer your question.
No, it's okay.
But I guess I'm thinking about this idea that we've all been there in some form or another. It might not look the same, but remembering that we've all been through certain things. Like if somebody like honks at you on the street, like when you're in the car and somebody's having a road rage moment, being able like to reflect and be like, there's been days that I've had bad days too, and I've done that. Or if just these interactions, instead of maybe internalizing them and wanting to knee-jerk reaction that these are just bad people. It's just like we all have bad days. It doesn't necessarily excuse people's actions, but it just might soften our hearts around the idea that it's like, I've felt that way too. It might not look the same, but I've questioned things too before. Or I don't know that those are the greatest examples, but
no, I think those are great.
I guess I think that helps when being able to listen to somebody. This idea around there's no fixing. Our job is not to fix someone or to fix their problem. It's to give them the support that they need in order to quote unquote fix it themselves or to work through it themselves. I think the idea that comes up for me a lot is like the idea of the midwife, where it's like they're not giving birth, they're assisting someone else in giving birth. So so they are helping guide some this birth out of someone. So you're like being able to practice the art of holy listening and open-ended questions allows you to help someone else birth what it is that needs to come out of them and what it is they need to do to get through a hard situation or whatever that might look like. So I think that was a really roundabout way to answer your question.
I like it.
And I think if we can do that for ourselves, it only makes us better people. If we can practice those kinds of behaviors with others, it's doing a service to them. It's doing a service to ourselves.
What advice would you give to somebody who is going through a faith transition?
I think community is a huge asset. Finding people who are working through a similar situation, or who have is huge at that time. I think just being able to feel seen and heard in what you're going through. I would maybe suggest, like, just being open to the transition. It's like you say, it's a transition. It's moving from one thing to another, and like I said, ideally to another and another and another, and that we're constantly transitioning throughout our lives into these different stages and seasons in our life. And that and so knowing that there are going to be different periods within that where there might be a time where you feel very angry about things, and being open to that and moving through that, and so that you can get on the other side of that, because there are a lot of people I've come across who are still in that place, and that they are of the opinion that the church or whatever church they were involved in is just pure evil. And I say that knowing that, like, there is some real evil out there, and I'm not trying to excuse that, but I guess I'll just say with the Mormon church in particular, and with my experience, like, I now have the ability to look at it in the nuanced way of, like, they do really great things, and being part of a church can be a really good experience, but it isn't for everyone, and that there is a lot of damage caused when people are culturally and socially corralled into doing and being one thing. And so all that is to say, just advice would be just move through those emotions, get in with, like, a community, or, like, find perhaps a group that can help you move through those different phases, and that you can find community in, and maybe also be a little humble. Like, I've found a lot of humility now, that it's like I really thought that I knew for sure that I was right after I left, and that I don't think at the end of the day, I don't think we know anything.
Yeah.
That it's all a great mystery,
Yeah.
and that there's beauty in that mystery, and in the unknown, and in the possibility of things changing, and our beliefs changing, and that's okay. And if anything, it's a beautiful thing to be malleable.
Yeah, I love that. I think you have a lot of really great advice, and I'm really grateful that you were willing to spend the time to talk about these things. And I know that it's been a hard we've spent many hours on this so far, and so I've been very grateful for you for being willing to even talk with me and express yourself and work through some of these emotions that you feel like you have. And I feel like you're very eloquent in explaining your feelings, and I really appreciate the advice that you have, and just you as a person. I'm really grateful for you, and I look up to you a lot, and I'm glad that you're a part of our family. So, and thank you, Melanie, for being willing to be on the podcast with me. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you being so vulnerable with your feelings and your emotions, and, you know, to talk about these things that I know are really hard. And I really appreciate you being willing to be on here with me.
Thanks, Abby. I appreciate you too, and I'm really proud of you for a lot of things. But, like, what you're doing here is pretty awesome.
Thanks, Mel.
These podcasts are great, and I just appreciate your you asking questions and you searching and trying to get people different perspectives from so many people, because I think that's just what life is all about.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you. I've enjoyed it. I really enjoy it. So it's been great to talk to people. It's getting me out of my comfort zone.
For sure.
For sure. But it's been great.
Yes, this was not my power place necessarily.
Yeah, me neither. But it's okay. It's good. I like that we can do it together. So thank you. I love you very much.
Love you too.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Absolutely Me. Thank you to everyone who helped make this possible. Shout out to Tanner Johnson for the amazing intro. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, tell all your friends. And we'll be back next Friday with another episode. Love you. Bye.